investigations, and public education. The research function of 𝐓𝐶RAJ plays an integral role in complementing and shaping strategies, advocacy, as well as evidence-based decision-making at the Commission. Good morning to you, our cherished viewers. You're welcome to the 6th edition of 𝐓𝐶RAJ And You. This is the platform where we break down the triple mandates of the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, 𝐓𝐶RAJ, into relatable and practical conversations that matter to you. I am Rufina Dimbwe Palve, and it is a delight to come your way every month with thought-provoking, forward-looking, and insightful conversations on human rights, administrative justice, good governance, and anti-corruption enforcement in Ghana. We are coming to you from our head office located at the Old Parliament House in Accra, and we're streaming live via Facebook at 𝐓𝐶RAJ Ghana. And so we encourage you to get interactive with us, like and share this link. We also encourage you to send in your thoughts, questions, and comments as the conversation progresses. In today's edition, we're taking a critical look at the function of 𝐓𝐶RAJ. We are looking at its evolution, its impact, and its future. We would be exploring certain questions regarding early investigations that 𝐓𝐶RAJ has conducted into harmful cultural practices like chokosi and how research has influenced national advocacy. We'd also take a critical look at the de facto function of 𝐓𝐶RAJ as the national preventive mechanism long before Ghana ratified the optional protocols on the Convention Against Torture. We'll also look at 𝐓𝐶RAJ's role in monitoring prisons and police cells since 1995 and how this has impacted on the rights of detainees. Viewers, this morning, this conversation is one which is about evidence, impact, and the future of human rights protection in Ghana. And to help us unpack, we are joined by the Director of Research at the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, Dr. Lillian Ayite-Nyampong. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's lovely to have you on 𝐓𝐶RAJ And You. Thank you so much for making the time.
It's a delight to be part of the program.
Great. In fact, you're looking beautiful, by the way.
You are, as usual.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And so to begin the conversation, we're going to start on the premise of how the research function of 𝐓𝐶RAJ started and how it has evolved over the years up until this time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Your introduction was pretty comprehensive and seems to have gone ahead of me already. Yes, I would try to complement what you have said. Before addressing your question, I think it's just useful to shed light on what research entails. We have a number of new staff with us.
Yes.
And it's good for them just to have an appreciation of what is research. When we say research, it's such a broad term. But for our purposes, I would just say that, in fact, research deepens the understanding of a subject or phenomenon, by collecting information. This information could be collected deductively or inductively. Deductively, usually you set out with specific hypotheses to test, and then you work out specific research questions aligned to the hypothesis, and then you go on the field to gather the data. In the inductive approach, it's a little bit the other way around. You go into the field with an open mind and quite a loose, approach. So as data emerges, you draw on the emergent data for the appropriate interpretative framework, and that sort of helps to develop a kind of a theory for you, which is usually based on what we call the grounded, theory approach. With the commission, because primarily we are an investigative body, we focus mostly on deductive approaches. Research complements that because most of our approaches are inductive based. Now, coming to your question, how research has evolved.
Yes.
Yeah. The research function is quite an age-old function. If I'm talking about age-old, I'm just going back to the inception of the commission, not to the early centuries. So we are looking at, 1993. And it commenced as a desk manned by one officer. the late Mr. 𝐂𝐨𝐻𝐤, may he rest in peace. So he worked actively during that period. The function was at the time supervised by the director legal. I'm sure you may have heard of her, Mrs. Christasy.
Yes, I have.
And then later by the director operations, who actually doubled as chief of investigations, now Professor Kenatefah.
Oh, wow.
Now, it existed as such as a desk till 2000, and then it was expanded, into a unit. I joined in 2000, so it was expanded into a unit.
Okay.
And we have just few staff then. But then it was active work, though not many staff, very focused and active work. In 2001, a newly established department, namely Public Education and Anti-Corruption, this is a joint department, was established, and it was headed by Mrs. Christasy. That department was a big one because it oversaw public education, public relations, and here I just vividly recall the late lawyer Samuel Bosompim. I don't think you
No.
you
I didn't
met
meet him.
Yeah, very nice, committed, passionate gentleman. And then we also, I remember the late Mr. Kumson. These are very, committed people who contributed, to the department, the public education department, which was a joint department of public education and anti-corruption. And then research unit was also under that.
Okay.
So that was quite a huge unit, a huge department. Now in 2005, separate departments were constituted. So we had public education department headed by Mrs. Christasy, anti-corruption then now by Mr. Chesayamdo,
Okay.
whom I'm sure you met.
Yes, I did meet him.
So research was overseen by the public education, directorate.
Okay.
That is Mrs. Christasy. So in short, that is how it has evolved. In fact, from 2001 till 2015, I recall that we had focal persons at all the regions and all, the regions, not the districts.
Mm.
And that facilitated what we did because we work, in partnership. We draw actively on the synergies of the regions. In fact, Chraj is what it is actually, mainly because of our regions and districts, what happens there. So that was useful up to 2015. Now, from inception to 2015, we've undertaken numerous research projects. We have a number of them have been published and are on our website and printed and also disseminated. I would say that generally, when you look at NHRIs in Africa, Chraj is one of few NHRIs that have a research function.
Oh.
And so probably I would say that others may learn from us. We are a sort of a model for them to learn from on the basis of how research has driven the commission over the period. Our research reports, we have the periodic, what I would say the regular ones, the famous State of Human Rights Monitoring reports, known as the 𝐓𝐨𝐻𝐤 reports.
Yes.
So these are undertaken at periodic times, so they are periodic reports. We also have the prisons and police cells monitoring activities.
Yeah.
So that's also that used to be, done also periodically.
Okay.
And then, of course, you're well aware of what happened in 2024 when we rallied all of you passionately to monitor and observe the
parliamentary.
The 2024 presidential and parliamentary elections.
Yes.
And almost everyone in the commission was brought on board, and we worked hard, towards that. So these are all periodic ones. Besides the periodic ones, we also have specialized reports. This is the aim is to draw attention to specific thematic areas.
Okay.
That sometimes on demand. So sometimes maybe the Parliament of Ghana would want us to research into a particular area.
Okay.
Sometimes based on media reports, we decide to research on a particular area. So these are not necessarily periodic, but they are specific thematic, areas. If you would recall, we did some work. I don't know whether you were around then, but we did some work along the Volta Lake, looking at the rights of children involved in
When I
worst
joined, I
forms of
heard.
child labor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then we have done some work also on alien forced marriages. And at the instance of UNICEF, we did some work mapping institutions involved in child protection in Ghana. And then on our own initiative, we decided that since Chraj receives a lot of data, a lot of complaints, and so produces voluminous data, it is important for such data to drive us.
Yeah.
Data speaks to us, and we must be listening to what data is saying to us. And so the department decided to embark on a quadrennial. Every 4 years, we do a kind of an analysis of our statistics and bring out key, messages that inform our day-to-day work, our annual work plan,
Okay.
sort of even the strategic direction of the commission.
Okay.
We have worked actively with the National Registrar, Mr. Bintum. He's been of immense support,
Yes.
to the research department, and of course, vice versa. I think I would bring it to a close for now on that
Okay.
question. Yeah.
Your responses have touched on the key functions of the research department in general. And so I want us to take the conversation to the work on the ground. You mentioned some of the examples of research that has been conducted by Chraj, the one on the Volta Lake, in addition to election monitoring and other research that the commission has done. And so can you take us into some of those research and then give us some highlights of those research and how they have impacted the work of Chraj or even national conversations regarding human rights protection?
Yeah, stemming from a number of treaties that we have ratified as a nation, and also stemming from the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, our own Children's Act, relevant ILO conventions, we decided as a commission, and I would say also on the demand at the time of the need to protect the rights of children involved, in worst forms of child labor, particularly in fishing communities, because a number of areas, were touched previously, but in fishing communities, not much was done in the area. So we decided to do that, and it was backed by empirical, data.
Okay.
Usually we go on the field and we stay there a number of days, and then we have active interactions with both formal and informal actors. So I recall with the research on child labor, for instance, we met with a number of formal actors and also informal actors.
Okay.
That is important to us. In fact, one key thing that research does is to bridge the gap, between law and practice. Ghana has ratified a number of United Nations conventions on human rights.
Yeah.
A number of treaties also ILO, related, laws. And yet on the ground, you'd notice that there is a gap. In practice, there is a gap.
Yeah.
Even though I'm addressing, child labor, just to take you off a little to this aspect, one of the first, research projects that we undertook, this was on trokosi.
Yes.
Trokosi, it's a form of ritual or customary servitude. I would say it's also a form of communal sort of social control. How to ensure that communities are deterred the punishments that are meted out. Unfortunately, this is to children. They receive the punishment because these are young vestal virgins, sometimes as young as 12 and under, about 8 years, who are made to atone for the sins of, various communities. And the thought is that when they do that, it will deter the community, to serve as a strong deterrent from, committing offenses in the future. And even though this practice was criminalized way back in 1998 as a result of the Commission's active and vigorous advocacy, the practice still prevails. So I was talking about research, bringing what is on the ground, and I was speaking about informal actors.
Yeah.
So with the research on, child labor, we focused on parents,
Okay.
got their views. We focused on chiefs, got their views, because when you're actually implementing these laws, they are the key actors. So you can have very powerful laws, very powerful treaties. But contexts are very specific. And research brings to the fore, both, of course, deductively, but predominantly inductively, specific contents to answer the whys and hows. It was a powerful, activity because the findings were pretty useful. I remember in one of the communities, which we stressed in our reports, that this community, what happens is, when it is time to go for, market days, and the children are supposed to go do fishing and then market them, they decided that they'll hold off school.
Oh, that's sad.
They'll hold off school for a period of time so the children can help their parents, whatever they need to do, whether they're marketing their products or whatever they're marketing, whatever, so that the parents can get some income to take care of them. On one side, it seemed pretty sad. But then on the other hand, we noticed that was quite innovative. Not that we were supporting child labor, but what we made clear to them was the rights of the child must be respected. But we also acknowledge such flexible, practical arrangements, because what happened was, with schools that agreed with such communal arrangements, such schools tended to perform better relatively.
That's interesting.
Interesting, because the parents at least had some support, of course, not ensuring that the rights of children were abused, so that children engaged in activities that were not detrimental to their health. And then at the same time, the schools also benefited, because you see, when it's market days and you are in the classroom teaching, the children have little concentration. You don't even find them. They are not there. So research brings out this kind of practical issues, how you can, have a good balance between specific contexts and what we do formally as human rights advocates or as NHRIs, which I think is really great. So I touched on the trochocele practice.
Yes.
And I remember that was I wasn't there yet. I came in 2000, but of course I got to know about the research activity. That activity was overseen by the then Director of Operations, Benjamin Kumbuo. I'm sure you heard about him, because later he became a lecturer at the School of Law and I think a Minister of Defense.
Yes.
So quite a key person who led that research. And there were other harmful cultural practices that were also at the time, criminalized. Female genital mutilation. Some say it's cutting, but we also want to stress it's mutilation.
Okay.
So female genital mutilation and early and forced marriages. Now, just subsequent to that, in 1997, a report was presented. This is by our Commissioner Dr. 𝐂𝐇𝐑𝐀𝐉'𝐬, then the director of the Northern Regional Office of the
Okay.
Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice. In fact, he and Mr. Chasayamdo, then I would say the officer in charge of operations at the Northern Regional Office, led a good investigation and research activity. At the time, they worked hand in hand, and still we do work hand in hand. And that research and investigation activity was into the Gambaga witch camp. In fact, it inspired a lot of advocacy and debate similar to the action that the commission took on Trokosi. In fact, it brought to the fore all of a sudden harmful cultural practices, and almost key civil society organizations, human rights organizations, the United States Department report, which is an annual report, which is a key report, began to, give visibility to such actions. But I think that we need to pat ourselves on the back that the commissioner, Dr. 𝐂𝐑𝐀𝐉'𝐬, led that report way back in 1997. I know in recent times we did the gender-based violence, you remember?
Yes.
Is it sponsored by Crossroads?
Crossroads, yes.
And I want
society.
Exactly, and I want to put on record that the activity started way back with the commissioner himself. So Chraj has worked actively in that respect. In fact, it led to a famous roundtable conference in 1998. It's a pity that we don't have these reports since fire gutted our offices.
Okay.
These reports were all available at the library, and almost all the commissioners, past commissioners and directors, I remember Miss Anna Bosman, Professor Tefa, Mrs. Chris Darcy, and all the past commissioners and directors have worked actively towards that. So what we have today, with a number of laws passed to criminalize these activities, dates way back to the commission's inception period. Thank you.
Madam, I'm particularly interested, just on the same subject matter, about the monitoring role of Chraj. In most instances, some people might not regard the harm or the human rights violations that are meted out to people kept in prayer camps, under or deprived of their liberty in one way or the other. And so if you can touch on some work that we have done regarding torture in some of these places, and also the monitoring of prisons and police cells since 1995, and how the rights of people, detainees, and other people, have improved since that time.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's an important question and touches on an important function. While I am, getting ready to address that, I want to mention here that, research's role is generally implicit.
Okay.
There is not an explicit reference to research by the constitutional and legislative provisions, that set the commission up.
Okay.
But I'm sure right from our conversations here, you've noticed that it's driven the commission, quietly but powerfully in a number of ways.
Yes.
And you touch on monitoring. Yeah, that's one of our key functions, monitoring and research. And another aspect of our functions, also data analysis and interpretation. You analyze data, you draw some interpretation from it.
Okay.
So it makes sense. And then the third aspect is documentation.
Okay.
And here I would want to mention also that the library function also comes, and
the library of the commission.
The library of the commission.
Okay.
The research department has oversight of the library commission.
Okay.
Now, since the inception of the commission, there have been, a number of debates about persons whose liberties are deprived legally of their liberties.
Yeah.
And then we have those in non-legal confinement. These are the Trokosis, for instance, because they're kept in fetish shrines. So that's a form of non-legal confinement. And then we have the witch camps, which is a form of non-legal confinement.
Yes.
I guess what we are very much interested in now is the legal forms of confinement.
Yes.
So persons who are deprived of their liberty. In 1995, on the basis of the debates, that have been going on and discussions, and generally about the rights of prisoners, the commission decided to, we call it then, inspection of prisons
Okay.
and police cells. And we visited these facilities to look at the material conditions. And by material conditions, I mean the feeding, sanitation, spacing, whether they're overcrowded or not, and then also give attention to specific categories of persons.
Okay.
Initially, we looked at remand prisoners, and then later, following a program or a training undertaken in Uganda under the auspices of the Association for the Prevention of Torture. This association has been instrumental in promoting the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture, Inhuman and Degrading Treatment. This optional protocol, optional protocols are treaties in themselves. Yeah. Of course, they complement the parent treaty. But the optional protocol against torture and all forms of degrading treatment sets in place a regular system of visits into the detention facilities.
Okay.
And it has a very wide scope. It is not limited only to prisons and police cells, various forms of detention institutions. So on the basis of that, following the Commission's report in 1995, which many applauded because it unearthed all kinds, of practical situations that existed in our prisons and police cells, particularly about overcrowding and the large numbers of remand prisoners. I remember in 2001, for instance, the United States Department report made a particular reference to Chraj's reports. That the advocacy we have, the public advocacy on the rights of detainees, actually owes its activity to the Commission's initial, research and investigations activity into prisons and police cells. I remember and recall that over the years, when we visit and also visit the police cells, and if I'm sure you've looked at some of our reports, and some of you listeners, I'm sure, have also looked at some of our reports. Overcrowding in both prisons and police cells was unacceptable. In the police cells, for instance, you have suspects packed like matchsticks, and they sleep in a strategic arrangement and sometimes take turns to sleep because the space is just woefully inadequate to accommodate them. We are not talking about the stench and the smell, because many a time, their excreta and whatever it's kept in the cells. I don't think you visited before.
No, I haven't.
I think these are hopefully, with the action of Ghana's efforts in signing the 𝐂𝐇𝐑𝐀. Ghana signed, I think in 2006, and signing, you are declaring your intention not to do anything contrary to the provisions of the treaty. And then 10 years later, I have to say that, in fact, in 2006, the research department was passionately involved and contributed towards the signing of the 𝐂𝐇𝐑𝐀. I remember a big conference that we did, and Ms. Bosman was there, Professor Tefa and others were there. Huge conference with most of civil society organizations. And what we did was, because the 𝐂𝐶𝐑𝐀 was pretty new for many of them, so we sensitized them on the
Okay.
𝐂𝐑𝐑𝐀 and the need for Ghana to ratify. Now it took us 10 years before it was ratified. So Ghana has ratified in 2016. And the demands upon us is that we constitute a national preventive mechanism. The national preventive mechanism establishes a regular system of visits
Okay.
to prisons and police cells. And I mentioned to you that drawing on the 𝐂𝐑𝐀, the scope is very broad. So it's not only limited to prisons
Prisons
and
police
police cells.
Yeah.
Later, probably you can do maybe another Chraj And You, probably with the human rights director, because I think it's useful to get ourselves also educated on the 𝐂𝐑𝐀, the NPM, the international also body that visits, which is the SPT.
Okay.
You know, so this was useful for us in 2004. I'm just trying to go, I'm putting bits and pieces together, because immediately we had to look at our methodology of visits. And then we advanced from inspection to monitoring, because, you don't merely just go to inspect. You are actually looking at compliance also with international human rights treaties. And also with us here in Ghana, we have our own laws also.
Yes.
We have the constitution, we have provisions of the constitution, that frowns upon torture and inhuman, treatment. And so we broadened our scope, we standardized our methods, and that meant also a lot of work, because the indicators then were many. We developed a number of indicators. We were looking at generally the material conditions. We were looking at the social, and also the economic rights generally.
Okay. Of the inmates.
Yes, generally. We also looked at specific categories of persons. And then under the specific categories of persons, we included nursing mothers, pregnant women, and then we also included persons with disabilities, the various forms of disabilities. It was very broad.
Yeah, extensive.
In fact, I remember then that we had the South African Human Rights Commission coming to visit. We were holding one of our training programs for staff, because we had focal persons in the regions. We, at the time, usually will bring them together,
okay,
along with the regional directors, and then train them. And because we had reviewed our monitoring mechanisms in line with the training we did in Uganda, also complying with the demands of the 𝐂𝐑𝐀, it was necessary that we brought our staff together.
Yes.
It was many of them then were present. And the South African Commission at the time visited, and they were present when we went through, our monitoring mechanisms. I also remember that we were invited. In fact, Miss Bosman, I remember, and myself were in Cape Town. That was way back, to also share our monitoring mechanism. And one of the officials who interviewed us currently serves on the international committee. This is the SPT. I remember she interviewed me on our monitoring mechanism, and I shared details, because our monitoring mechanism was pretty detailed.
Yes.
And that, I believe, has guided a number of the mechanisms, visiting mechanisms, those African countries that have ratified and who have already constituted an NPM. I believe that our monitoring tool was a guide.
Yeah.
We were also invited to Geneva. I was in Geneva, to also, at the time, represent the African region. There were others representing other regions. There were 3 of us, and they actually looked at our monitoring tools, our questionnaires, one question after the other, and they were really impressed. So even way before Ghana signed or even ratified, I would say, we're operating already as an NPM. That's why I say as a de facto NPM.
Yes.
And it's a boost to us. Now I know that the Commission is working passionately to ensure that Ghana's NPM, functions as it is supposed to. and that the various, legal provisions are in place to ensure that, I'm sure they're reviewing, in the process of reviewing, the act that establishes act. These are things that, they're looking at. And I look forward that the MPM would be active,
Yes.
and would function effectively. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. In fact, just drawing on the insights that you have given, it is very interesting and very insightful. There are so many things that I'm sure several of our viewers were unaware of or didn't know about Chraj. And I want to link it to Chraj being a model national human rights institution in West Africa, in Africa, and is respected globally. And in the time that I have been with Chraj, I have seen several national human rights institutions visit Chraj and for study purposes, on study visits to learn from Chraj on how it has its legal frameworks, the way it conducts its work, and all of that. And so this takes me to my next question, and that is, in what ways specifically the research function has contributed to enhancing Chraj's public image and institutional credibility?
Okay, thank you. I think in responding to the previous questions, I have indirectly touched on that.
Yeah,
but I would specifically address that. One of our flagship programs, besides the prisons monitoring, which inspired public advocacy and which led to the respect of the rights of detainees. I would say prior to that, people thought, okay, you have committed offense, you have committed a crime. Your liberties, are restricted,
Yeah.
Legally. What is it? You should just find yourself then and enjoy the
walk away.
punishment,
Yeah.
and then you come back reformed. But I think that the action that Chraj took was instrumental because we drew on the broader framework of human rights as an NHRI. That human rights, we have human rights by virtue of being human. So regardless of who you are, where you are, where you are coming from, no one takes that away from you.
Yes.
The law, the law does not actually give us human rights. Have you thought about that? The law doesn't give us human rights.
It's inherent.
Yes, exactly. So you are already mentioning some of the principles of human rights.
Yeah.
So, human rights are inherent to us. No one can take these rights from us. They are indivisible. Sorry, they are indivisible. They are all part of one.
Yeah.
They are enjoyed in view of complementarity. They complement, each other.
Yeah.
So we looked at the general culture of human rights to begin to promote the rights of prisoners. And people began to think, sometimes when you make things a bit personal, that probably your brother maybe went to steal a pack of fried rice. And for some reason, he's arrested, because that happens.
Yes.
Maybe as a juvenile. And then he's put in the same cells as adults. And sometimes they're forgotten in there and they stay there for months. My PhD research focused on the rights of children in conflict with the law.
Okay.
And looking at the perspectives of children in conflict with the law in terms of human rights. And so what Chraj did as part of his efforts to promote the general culture of detainees was to let people know that, look, a young person like that should not be in the same cells, as an adult. And usually when we come across, such people, immediately we draw attention and we collaborate actively with the detaining authorities, with the Ghana Police Service, and the related authorities to ensure that the person is taken out. In fact, with juveniles, for instance, we have the remand homes, Adosu, and a number of remand homes situated in, a number of regions in Ghana. And so I'm just touching on the fact that what we did as a commission was, I would say, simplistic if we just limit it to the rights, to, the material conditions in detention. We raised visibility and a general awareness about the culture of human rights, whether it's in terms of suspects, in terms of prisoners. That is what we did. And I think that Ghana, as we have it now, we have come a long way, and we owe a lot of these efforts to what we did. If you would recall, the Justice for All program, which was initiated just to expedite the trial of remand prisoners, I would say that that program was inspired largely by Chraj's efforts of monitoring detention institutions. Because when our reports come out, when we release our reports and they're widely disseminated, people get to know and realize, wow, these numbers of remand prisoners have been kept for this number of years. So a number of, I would say, reforms, even non-custodial, sentencing. I remember that in 2004, Chraj held a key conference similar to the one we held, because I think it was the same year that we did the conference on the 𝐂𝐸𝐑𝐀𝐉'𝐬, and raised awareness on that. Yes, it was 2004. It was a big conference. We did that in collaboration with the judiciary, in collaboration with, a number of state actors. And we thought that after that, conference, a bill was going to be passed, put together quickly and passed. Here we are. We are still talking about non-custodial sentencing. So we have come a long way.
Yes, we have.
Real kudos. We have contributed to public advocacy. We have driven efforts, that contributed to the Justice for All, programs. We have, even by our State of Human Rights reports, and that I have not mentioned because that also dates back to inception of the commission. In 1998, for instance, we had a good report. The only thing was, it was not backed by empirical data. It was based mainly on media reports. So, for instance, with the Public Affairs Department, maybe you pick up a number of newspaper, summaries and reports on human rights abuses. And then, you toss it over to us. That was what we did. I remember the late Mr. Bosompeng was active on that. And this report was usually delivered on 10th December, which is Human Rights Day. And it was a big occasion because it offered us opportunity to create visibility about the wide array of activities that Chraj usually undertakes. The SOHR, or State of Human Rights Monitoring, covered a number of areas. We looked at education, under education, for instance, at the time, capitation, grants, a free compulsory universal, basic education. We looked at bullying. We looked at availability of education materials. We looked at the infrastructure, many areas. That was following what we did initially in 1998, because as I mentioned, that was not backed by empirical data. But these other ones that demanded field visit commenced in 2005, when we began to give focus to social and economic rights of the citizenry. And so I had already mentioned that the rights of education and that the right of health. Sometimes we did unannounced visits to the hospitals. We looked at the patient charter. Now, when I go to hospitals, I look around, I don't see much on patient's charter. What I see is rather the rights of the health personnel themselves. So they state clearly that, you must carry yourself in a manner that would not infringe on the rights of the health personnel. But we know from recent reports what has been happening in our hospitals,
Yes.
The shortage of beds, people sleeping on the floor, sometimes lack of attention. Someone is there being operated on, and we have the health personnel sometimes talking on the phone and others. So we covered a number of areas. It was a major thing we did under the 𝐂𝐸HR reports, research activity, which yielded the 𝐂𝐸HR reports. But then what we noticed was, much as it was good and, a laudable activity, at the time we realized the scope was broad because there were always demands. Okay, we needed to look at this. We need to look at environmental rights.
Yeah.
We needed to look at civil and political rights. We need to look at persons with disabilities. We need to look at children. And the area was so broad that somehow we thought that thinly we were spreading ourselves across. And then it was becoming a bit difficult to follow up on individual now themes that needed to be actively followed upon. You remember also the research we did in mining communities.
Yes.
Yeah. Now we're talking about business and human
Human
rights.
rights.
That has emerged, as a result of the commission's activity on that and ensuring that businesses, and corporate bodies are held accountable. So we did a lot, but I guess probably we were a bit too ambitious. And so what we decided, I remember I submitted a paper to the commission on that we probably should look at specific themes more than cutting across all these areas.
Okay.
Otherwise, following up on the areas, ensuring that the rights of our citizens, because at the end of the day, it is not just scoring points that, okay, we've done this research, we have produced this report, we have submitted this, to this UN agency, we have met the requirements of, a peer review mechanism, whether it's Africa or United Nations, the SDGs, we are compliant. At the end of the day, for me as a researcher and as a commission, we need to ask ourselves, what change is happening on the ground in terms of trochosis, in terms of witchcraft accusations, in terms of detainees, in terms of the various categories of people we have sought, to protect. And that I have leaned predominantly towards human rights.
Yes.
This is because initially, even though we had the three-pronged mandate and we were working actively towards that, the demands on the abuses, particularly on the abuse of children, and I want to put that on record that, in fact, since the inception of this commission, because I've worked in the area of research, complaints that we have received over the years have predominantly been about children. Predominantly. And I invite our listeners and even internal staff who are new, go on the website, look at our reports, and look at our statistics. And it has been speaking and calling out loudly to us. Non-maintenance of children, the abuse and violation of the right to education and health of children. And these are key areas that have driven us and made us lean a bit predominantly towards human rights. But that has been corrected. It's just like affirmative action.
Yeah.
So people are asking, why are we always concentrating on girls, and then what about the boys?
Yes.
So it was just also in response to the data that we're collecting based on our complaints and also what was happening in Ghanaian society. Now we have quite a good balance. We have, the anti-corruption, which took center stage, and in fact, from 2005 that the department was established, they started working, actively towards ensuring that there is visibility on integrity issues. There is visibility generally in terms of measures that could curb corruption, both macro and micro forms of corruption, within Ghana. And you are well aware of what the department, has done over the period.
Yes.
And so even though from inception we used to have the Human Rights Day, because of the impetus that the commission decided to give to integrity issues, the report on anti-corruption began to take center stage.
Okay.
And so now, if you recall, now we have Anti-Corruption Day, which is on the 9th,
9th, yes.
and then 10th is a
Human
Human
Rights
Rights Day.
Yes.
And similarly, also with administrative justice. So there has been an effort to keep a balance across. Now, the question is, how have we, apart from the visibility we have created and how we have contributed generally in ensuring that within Ghana, the rights, the social and economic rights of the citizenry are promoted and protected, the rights of detainees, the rights of those in non-legal confinement, such as the trocosis and, persons accused of witches or alleged to be witches, are protected. It is important, for us now as research to see how our activities are also evenly distributed, across our mandate areas. In fact, that was why we decided we needed to initiate the quadrennial analysis of complaints.
Okay.
And these are based on grievances that are lodged to the commission. And we look at human rights, administrative justice, and anti-corruption. This is an important exercise. Why? Because, it gives you an idea the extent of demand that the public makes on the services of the commission.
Okay.
Are people interested at all? Because you look at our grievances, I'm sure some have asked that, why don't we look at maybe cases that have been closed? That is great. We can look at that, also as part of what we do. But why we chose the grievances is, it gives you an idea who are interested at all in what we're doing. So just looking at the complaints, okay, these category of people, do we have a number of children, lodging complaints with us? If we don't, why is that the case? If they are lodging, what are their interest areas? Do we have a number of persons with disabilities lodging complaints with us?
Yeah.
If they do, why? So it actually drives the commission in a particular direction. And my prayer is that this is an aspect that we can continue and also create visibility about the findings. So at least those outside, both external and internal, would have an idea what drives, the everyday work of the commission.
All right, viewers, if you are just tuning in, this is Chraj And You. This is a platform where we break down the triple mandates of the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice into relatable and practical conversations that matter to you. We have been discussing research as an integral component of Chraj's work, and we've looked at how the research function complements the work of Chraj and enables Chraj to effectively carry out its other mandates, such as investigations and public relations. So we want to encourage you to keep your questions coming in as the conversation progresses. Madam, we're moving on with the conversation. And so these are just the last few questions that we're going to take. And so specifically, I want to know how the research department supports the other departments and units within the commission in terms of investigations and in terms of public education, campaign development, etc.
Okay, as I did mention earlier on, our function is an implicit one.
Okay.
But then it powerfully drives the commission.
Exactly.
And we have provided support across the various functions, from anti-corruption to human rights to monitoring and evaluation, even to the human resource function.
Okay.
We have statisticians with us, and sometimes they draw on their functions, to help in data analysis and all that for the commission. But specifically, we have supported the anti-corruption predominantly. I remember and recall, over the recent past, that our staff has been instrumental, in providing or contributing to the National Implementation Support Unit, the NISU, and collaborated also with the Monitoring and the Evaluation Committee, MONICOM, and even in the providing valuable reports at the supervisory, level of the high implementation, committee, which is the HENLIC, to track the NACAP progress. Now, we have also complemented investigations right from the outset. As I mentioned, that we have worked hand in hand with them, right from the Trokosi investigations through to the witchcraft investigations into the Gambaga, witch camp, the famous investigations we did in the mining communities.
Yes.
We worked hand in hand. We actually go with investigators. Maybe here I would just mention briefly for the purpose of our new staff and younger staff that have joined us. I'm sure sometimes you wonder, what's the difference between investigations and research?
Yes.
Yeah, they are interdependent. They are not mutually exclusive. They work together.
Yeah.
I would say investigations is a systematic fact-finding venture, that seeks information and gathers information pertaining to a specific complaint. This is within our context. So in this regard, it is more response. It is reactive. Research, on the other hand, is more preventative.
Okay.
So when, for instance, a complaint is launched, maybe communities in mining, persons in mining communities, so mining communities, their rights are being violated, and investigators go to do their fact finding. We join them and complement them with qualitative methods such as focus group discussions, in-depth interviews to bring out the whys and the hows. So research, even though it could be response or reactive, predominantly and primarily it is preventative.
Okay.
And so it utilizes, particularly within the context of the commission, because human rights, corruption, anti-corruption integrity issues, they are a bit sensitive. So if you go with very structured questions and just ask, oh, are you corrupt? And do you do this? And oh, the person can lie through. And then you just take your responses and you analyze.
Yeah.
But you see, when you do in-depth interviews, it brings out, some of the structural issues.
Yeah.
And that helps to deal with the phenomenon. So we don't say, over the years, we've been working in the area of anti-corruption, we've been working in this area, but still, our corruption index and whatever, sometimes we need to ask ourselves, are we in touch with what happens in practice? And so we have complemented investigations a lot, even though we are distinct. I've just, explained to you,
Yes.
How distinct the functions are, but we have worked actively with them. We have provided empirical evidence, for complaints generally.
Okay.
Yes. So we have worked with almost every department. As for public education, we are just like a twin.
Yes.
A twin, department. In fact, we were even previously way back, 2001, 2002, right through, over the couple of years after, we were referred to as twin departments.
Okay.
Because whatever we did, our research brought to the fore early warning signals, and quickly public education, the eyes are open to it. Oh, these are the areas we need to touch. They also go and do public education and say, look, we have noticed in the process of public education that these are some aspects you need to look at.
Yes.
So almost every department and function we have collaborated with quietly.
Yeah.
Quietly,
Yes.
but powerfully.
I can attest to that. And so as we are preparing to conclude, my final question would be, what are some of the recommendations that you would propose to enhance Chraj's research function over the next decade, particularly involving like the fact that, we're in a country which is rapidly changing.
Yes.
And so how would you advise Chraj, or what are some of the recommendations that you'd give to Chraj for its implementation over the next 10 years in order to enhance its work and also to enforce protection for human rights.
Let's take our documentation seriously.
Okay.
Let's not just, glorify the reports or romanticize the reports that we produce. And then that is it. Oh, we've met, the status and we've met the other status. Let us be concerned about our local communities. Let's listen to them. Let them drive what we do, even in terms of values. It's very, very important. What we've noticed, as I mentioned to you, in fact, the department has worked under a lot of demands because many a time we're done with one research activity and quickly there is a demand to do another one. Oh, then there is a demand to do another one. So we have not been able to follow through actively with our recommendations. And that is something we need to look at regarding documentation and reports. When reports are churned out, let us follow through. Let's make time to ensure that whatever Chraj has recommended in terms of persons whose liberties, deprived of their liberties, detainees, prisoners, let us follow through. It's quite a pity that some of the recommendations way back in 1995, we talked about feeding rations, low feeding rations, malnutrition, overcrowding, remand prisoners. We talked about non-custodial sentencing. They are still prevalent.
Yes.
In our prisons, the most recent visit that we did, of course, that goes back to a few years ago. Some prison facilities were unacceptably overcrowded. More than 300% overcrowded. We've documented in our reports. Again, the reports are they're sitting on the websites. It is our duty to take that, if it is public education, whichever function, to look at our reports and see how do we follow through.
Yes.
We could have an NPM established, just as we had our reports way back, how many years? But some of these conditions, we've come a long way. We've done so well, public advocacy, civil society involvement, but the actual conditions, they are there.
They still exist.
It means we need to look at our approaches more. We need to look at our methodologies. We need to be listening to the local communities that we are working with. We should finish our research cycles. Sometimes when I talk about that, people don't really understand. And, sometimes we think, oh, okay, once there's a demand for the other one, let us do it. You put this one down. But I think it is important. Otherwise, people will be suffering at the expense of us scoring marks.
Yes.
And we have come a long way as a commission. We've done so well. Let us continue to listen to our communities and ensure that whatever we do have relevance. But let us also build capacity of our researchers and non-lawyers. It helps the commission a lot.
Okay.
The commission, we know that drawing from the Paris principles, it should have pluralistic representation, and so let us give or accord significance to those who are not lawyers, but are experts in their own fields. Let's promote and build their capacities. It will bring such a good balance in what we do. Lawyers are great, but they're always holding, they want to ensure that the law is enforced.
Yeah.
But the context within which the laws are enforced are very specific.
Yes.
And that is why sometimes the enforcement doesn't go too well. And we need to work in collaboration with all the others. The library function is a key function for us. And the library function has driven us over the period. They're involved in, acquisition of relevant materials. They're involved in electronic, system management to ensure that if you want to retrieve a document or a book, you can do that.
Of course.
My prayer is that the library can be supported also. They have also been involved in ensuring that regions that have bookshelves are provided books every now and then.
Okay.
I think that is an aspect we need to look at. But finally, we can't do our work as a national human rights institution, as an anti-corruption agency, and also as an ombudsman, devoid of the context we find ourselves in. What is the context? There is a global context set for us. We see what is happening globally between America, Iran, Israel, Russia, China, name them. A lot has changed, in terms of the global context. The geopolitical context is transforming every now and then.
Yes.
And we need to be drawing our attention, particular to African countries, that look, we need to think about where we are also positioning ourselves.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, pressure comes upon us, and then we find ourselves being compelled to position ourselves in a particular way. There are a lot of powerful alliances that are undermining human rights and international humanitarian law.
Yes.
We see, look at the numbers that are being displaced, refugees, asylum seekers across. I know that we get busy in our day-to-day, and we're looking at our reports, but let us look broadly also to what is happening. It's very important. Let's look at data that is driving us. In fact, there is a whole shift now in the demographics, a whole shift in demographics.
Okay.
And we need to be aware of it. Life expectancy is on the increase. And I'm sure when you scheduled this, you didn't know that I was retiring today.
No, I didn't.
Exactly. So having turned 60, our data is showing us that many more people globally are turning 60 and more. And so we're going to have a huge population of older citizens. What is the repercussion? What is the repercussion of that? Or what are the ramifications for us as a human rights institution? Or in terms of the other mandate areas? But you see, Africa has a duality, because while there is an increase in life expectancy, globally, there is also a decline in fertility rates.
Yes.
So the population of young people, children that are growing to young people, are decreasing, but not in Africa. Africa is blessed because we have a huge, massive young population.
Yeah.
But you know what? I mentioned to you earlier on that our prisons house majority of young people.
That's sad.
So which is sad.
Yeah.
So we need to look at our demographics and see how we can take advantage of that and drive it actively. I have a number of things to say, but I'm coming against my own. So I think that is it for now.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. 𝐂𝐸𝐬𝐬. I want to, on behalf of the team of Chraj And You, wish you a happy birthday, a happy 60th birthday for that matter.
Thank you.
I want to quickly go on our social media and just take some of the comments from our viewers regarding the show so far. I have one here from Rexford Echo Osei. He says that beautiful and educative submissions. God bless you, Dr. Lillian. I also have several messages from Tiwia Efia Sa or Cha. Forgive me if I'm mentioning Cha. And in fact, there are several messages. She says, I'm watching from Chraj, the research department. She also says that congratulations, madam, on your 60th birthday. Dr. Mrs. Lillian 𝐂𝐸𝐬𝐬. May God continue to bless you. And I also have one question from Rexford. I don't know if you can quickly just take that before we conclude the show. He says that, what are some of the challenges encountered in your work, specifically in relation to having your independence? Oh, I usually have a challenge specifically in relation to your independence in your investigations without political interferences, and also in the area of security, especially since you are in joint investigation. Since you join in the investigation of mining areas, I don't know if that's something you want to quickly just comment about. Interference and also in relation to security in the mining areas.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The act that establishes the Chraj, provides, and the constitutional provision, provides some securities. I would say adequate securities for us in terms of our independence. And over the years, Rexford and others listening, would attest to the fact that from the period of Justice Emil Short, right through Miss Bosman, through the late Mr. Richard Kwesen, may he rest in peace, and then to the current Commissioner, Dr. 𝐂𝐸𝐬, we have endeavored to undertake our work independently. We draw on the act that establishes us, and there are policy documents also that guide what we do.
Okay.
So we don't do our work arbitrarily. And that also extends to the susceptibility to political interference. On the basis of the systems that are in place, the laws, the legislative provisions that are in place, and of course, the regular training that we offer to a staff to ensure that they are professional. We have endeavored, and I'm using that term, to be independent. People might view us probably differently.
Yes.
Sometimes an investigation report comes out, sometimes it's released, sometimes a research report is released. A, B, C, D, E may have the various views, but when they come back to us, I'm sure as a public affairs department, you have been actively involved in that regard, and the commissioners and the directors. If anyone has a doubt, feel free to come to the offices of the commission. We have nearly 100 offices established, regional offices, district offices. Approach us. Instead of just speaking to yourself or our media professionals, unfortunately, sometimes they tend to know it all.
Yeah.
Come and we will discuss with you. If you have any flaw, if you perceive of any flaw, we can discuss from the viewpoint of what we do, and I'm sure that you'll be rested also, in whatever doubts you have. But we have endeavored as a commission to be independent in what we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. 𝐂𝐸𝐬𝐬. And as you heard, Dr. 𝐂𝐸𝐬𝐬, she has shown a challenge to you that Chraj is an independent body. And so if you have any doubts, you can always approach us and we would discuss things with you from our point of view. I want to say a very big thank you to our guest today, Dr. Liliana 𝐂𝐸𝐬𝐬. She's the Director for Research at the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, for the insightful and valuable insights that she has shared. I have personally learned a lot, and I hope that you at home, you viewing us from work or listening to us because you're unable to look on your phone, we hope that you have also learned so much from today's discussion. As we conclude, we want to remind you that if you joined in late, you probably think that you have missed on this very important conversation, but the program has actually been recorded and will be shared on our YouTube, and so you can go and then rewatch it for more information. We also want to encourage you to get interactive with us and stay connected with us by following us on all our social media platforms at Chraj Ghana. You can also visit the website at www.chraj.gov.gh for additional information on the work of Chraj, especially on the various reports that our guest has mentioned today. My name is Rufina 𝐓𝐸𝐬𝐬, and as usual, I would encourage you to stay informed. We wish you a very good afternoon. Stay blessed.
Chraj And You, a communications platform for information sharing and public engagement. Chraj And You, a communication